The scent of burning celluloid, metallic and acrid, was the first thing that hit Elias Vance. It wasn't the smell of a film catching fire. That was sharp, quick, violent. This was slower, the slow, agonizing death of digital integrity. Elias slammed his fist onto the stainless steel console of the screening room, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the darkened theater. The 4K projector whirred in protest, bathing the empty velvet seats in a strobe of fractured light. "Stop it! Cut the feed!" he roared, his voice raw, vibrating with a desperation that hadn't felt this acute since the set collapsed on Echo Bloom 5 years ago. On the massive screen, the image froze, a single agonizing frame. Maya, the lead actress, her face a mask of trapped terror, illuminated not by the scene's intended romantic moonlight, but by the harsh, unforgiving glare of an off-camera work light. And then the digital artifacts began to bloom. Not glitches, but deliberate, overlaid distortions, moments that had been painstakingly edited out of the final cut, now bleeding back into view like fresh, arterial wounds on the pristine footage. The feed cut abruptly, plunging the room into blackness. The only illumination came from the emergency exit signs glowing sickly green. Elias leaned against the console, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He tasted blood in his mouth. He must have bitten his tongue. "It's running, Elias," a voice whispered from the corner. It was Sarah Jensen, his trusted editor, perched near the soundboard, clutching a worn coffee mug like a shield. Her face, usually composed, was etched with exhaustion and a terrifying kind of resolve. "It shouldn't be running," Elias grated out, straightening up. "That build was supposed to be locked down, encrypted, sandbox security at triple redundancy. How did that sequence get into the final review stream?" The sequence they had just witnessed was the raw, unedited take of scene 47 from the Gilded Cage, the pivotal confrontation between Maya and the film's powerful producer, Marcus Thorne. In the finished film, Thorne's character was verbally abusive, a classic cinematic villain. In the raw footage, the aggression had been terrifyingly real, crossing a boundary so invisible that only those who had been there knew it existed. Marcus Thorne wasn't just acting. He was assaulting her trust, her safety, his hand gripping her arm too tightly, his voice dropping to a predatory whisper entirely absent from the script. Elias knew the danger. Releasing that footage, even to a trusted circle of distributors and critics, was professional suicide, possibly worse. Marcus Thorne owned half of this studio, connections that ran deeper than the foundations of this very building. "I didn't push it to the external server," Sarah admitted, her voice barely audible. "I ran a local parity check, but the system flagged the internal timestamp. It's tagged Director's Cut. Full disclosure." Elias walked to the center of the room, the silence now heavy with accusation. Someone accessed the vault. Someone knew exactly which reel to pull. Or, Sarah suggested softly, meeting his gaze, "The system is so contaminated, it's just throwing out the ugliest truth it can find." Elias Vance was a celebrated auteur, known for his visceral, emotionally devastating realism. He had won critical acclaim for capturing the uncomfortable truths beneath the Hollywood veneer. But this time he wasn't capturing fiction. He was holding the blueprint to a crime. 3 months ago, Maya had come to him, tears streaming down her face, whispering about the accidents that kept happening on set, the jokes that weren't funny, the sense that every take was a performance of compliance under the guise of artistic direction. Elias had dismissed it then, caught up in the pressure cooker of a $90 million production, believing, or perhaps desperately wanting to believe, that Maya was overly sensitive or that Thorne was just being intense. But the raw footage didn't lie. The camera, his camera, the impartial eye he'd always trusted, had recorded Thorne's predatory behavior, the chilling way the grips would suddenly look away, the silence that followed Maya's suppressed gasps. Elias had spent the last 6 weeks in a feverish, paranoid state, sequestering every last frame of raw material, cross-referencing audio logs, bypassing studio security with ghost protocols Sarah had built years ago for just such an emergency. He had created a separate, hidden edit, the Reckoning Cut, a version that showed the movie as it should have been, interspersed with the horrifying truth of what happened between takes. He looked at the dark screen. The film, The Gilded Cage, was set for a massive, highly anticipated premiere next Friday. The marketing machine was already in overdrive. When does the review copy go to the first-wave critics? Elias asked, his voice regaining a dangerous steadiness. In 12 hours. FedEx pickup scheduled for 8 a.m., Sarah replied. Elias walked over to the door, his hand hovering over the magnetic lock. He needed air. He needed a strategy. He needed to know if he was about to launch a career or detonate his own life. Sarah, he said, turning back, his eyes burning with a grim determination. Get the hard drives. Every single one. We are pulling the film from the festival circuit. We are not screening the official cut. Elias, if you pull it now, the lawsuits will bankrupt you before Thorne even files his first injunction. What are you planning? Elias gave a grim, humorless smile. We're not going to play their game. We're going to release the evidence. We're going to let the audience decide what the Gilded Cage really is. You mean, release the uncut reckoning? Sarah whispered, the enormity of the act settling over them both. Yes, Elias confirmed, nodding slowly, but not through a back channel. We use the momentum of the premiere. We release it on the opening night. We give them the poison in the champagne. He knew the risk was astronomical. It was an act of pure cinematic defiance, an attempt to weaponize the medium he loved against the corruption that festered within it. The question wasn't if he would be ruined, but who he would take down with him. The next 72 hours were a blur of caffeine, paranoia, and high-stakes digital infiltration. Elias and Sarah moved their operation out of the studio offices and into a fortified, off-grid apartment in downtown LA, a place Elias had bought years ago under an LLC for clandestine scriptwriting. The core problem wasn't just releasing the footage. It was ensuring the right footage reached the right people immediately. Marcus Thorne's PR machine was a finely tuned weapon. Any leak would be immediately denounced as malicious editing or the ravings of a troubled artist. We need credibility, Elias muttered, pacing in front of a bank of monitors displaying cascading lines of code. We need an undeniable foundation. Sarah, hunched over her keyboard, nodded without looking up. We have the raw footage. We have the time-stamped audio overlays. The moments Thorne's dialogue shifted from character motivation to explicit threats. We have Maya's testimony, recorded under duress but verified by her lawyer, who is currently terrified but committed. The lawyer, Clara Reyes, was their crucial linchpin. She operated under the shadow of a massive non-disclosure agreement, but the evidence Elias possessed, evidence that proved Thorne had repeatedly violated California labor laws regarding hostile work environments, not to mention potential assault charges, gave her the leverage she needed. Clara can hold the formal legal briefing until after the premiere, Elias decided. We give the public the visceral proof first. Let them rage. Then Clara drops the hammer. The challenge of distribution was daunting. Hollywood was a closed ecosystem. A direct upload to a major platform would be flagged and pulled within minutes by Thorne's legal team, likely claiming copyright infringement on the master footage. We go viral, but we go decentralized, Elias explained, tapping a blueprint for a specialized release strategy. We upload the Reckoning cut, the full 140 minutes, including the deleted 15 minutes of unauthorized takes, to a custom-built peer-to-peer network that self-deletes its indexing nodes after 5 simultaneous downloads. We call it Project Pandora. Sarah's eyebrows shot up. That's technically brilliant, Elias, but who is going to know about it? We need eyes. We use the critics, Elias said, a slow grin spreading across his face. The ones we know are already suspicious of Thorne. The ones who value integrity over access. He began listing names. Vivian Shaw of the New Republic, known for her relentless deconstruction of power structures. Ben Carter, who wrote for an independent film blog but possessed a massive, loyal following. And most importantly, Eva Rostova, the notorious, anonymous film reviewer whose scathing, honest takes could make or break independent cinema. Eva Rostova won't be tempted by a studio press junket, Elias said. She follows the truth. We send her a physical drive, encrypted but with the master key disguised as a prop description note. Maya, the actress, had been the silent catalyst. She had left the city 2 days ago, staying with family in relative safety, waiting for the bomb to drop. Elias had promised her protection, but he knew the promise felt hollow until Thorne faced the consequences. On Wednesday evening, 24 hours before the scheduled premiere gala at the TCL Chinese Theater, the final version of the Reckoning cut was rendered. It was horrifying. It showed the beauty of Maya's performance, the artistic vision of the film, and then, in jarring juxtaposition, the dark, grinding reality of the production environment under Thorne's thumb. The camera often lingered too long on Maya's attempts to shield herself, the audio muffling the worst moments but amplifying the chilling silence of the crew. Elias stared at the final title card, which replaced the expected studio logo, the Gilded Cage, the director's uncut reckoning. It's done, he whispered. Sarah secured the specialized hard drive containing the access keys for Project Pandora. The digital ghost is ready. We trigger the external release script at 8:15 p.m., 15 minutes after the red carpet officially ends. That gives the critics enough time to get home and watch. Elias looked around the sterile, high-tech bunker they had created. Let the carnival begin. The premiere of The Gilded Cage was a spectacle of engineered perfection. Hollywood Boulevard was choked with flashing lights, velvet ropes, and carefully choreographed celebrity arrivals. Elias, dressed in a rented tuxedo that felt like an itchy shroud, walked the carpet with Marcus Thorne at his side. Thorne was a mountain of tailored confidence, his smile wide, his hand clamped possessively on Elias's shoulder. He was the picture of the successful mogul, a man who had financed, greenlit, and often controlled every aspect of the film's creation. "Elias, my boy, you look pale," Thorne boomed, leaning close so the microphones picked up his jovial tone. "Too much time locked in the cutting room? Eh? Don't worry. Tonight we celebrate the masterpiece." "It is a masterpiece, Marcus," Elias replied, his voice perfectly modulated, devoid of the tension ripping him apart internally. "A true reflection of chaos and control." "Exactly," Thorne laughed, oblivious. "The illusion of danger. That's what sells tickets." Elias had to maintain the illusion until the moment of detonation. Inside the opulent theater lobby, the pre-screening reception was a sea of industry elites sipping champagne, all waiting to praise the collaboration between the celebrated director and the titan producer. Maya was not there. She couldn't be. As the crowd began filing into the theater, Elias and Sarah slipped away, heading not to their assigned seats, but to a cramped utility closet backstage, which Sarah had painstakingly wired with a discreet satellite uplink. 10 minutes to curtain," Sarah confirmed, her fingers flying over a modified tablet. "The studio security sweep is minimal at this hour. They're all inside watching the trailers." Elias was shaking, not from fear, but from the immense, terrifying energy of finally pulling the trigger on a plan that could destroy multiple lives, including his own. "Marcus is in the VIP box, upper balcony," Elias noted, remembering Thorne's preference for the elevated view. "He'll have the best sightlines for the moment the credits roll." The lights dimmed across the massive theater. The familiar fanfare of the studio logo swelled, followed by the stylized opening title sequence of the Gilded Cage. The first act played flawlessly. The audience was mesmerized by the cinematography and Maya's luminous performance. Elias felt a bitter pang watching the beauty they had crafted, knowing what lay beneath the surface. Then came scene 47. On screen, the final, edited version played out. Thorne's character was menacing, yes, but within the bounds of conventional cinema. He delivered his lines, Maya reacted perfectly, and the tension resolved into a stylized freeze frame. The audience murmured their approval. Elias watched the clock on Sarah's tablet. 8:14 p.m. "Now, Sarah. Hit the trigger." Sarah pressed the single, glowing button on her tablet. Across the city and soon across the digital world, Project Pandora activated. A tiny, encrypted file, masked as a routine maintenance update for the distribution preview server, began executing its payload. It didn't just release the raw footage, it simultaneously sent direct download links, disguised as exclusive follow-up materials, to the target list of key cultural commentators. Inside the theater, as the screen faded to black before the transition to Act 2, a small, almost imperceptible flicker occurred. For a fraction of a second, the screen showed a blank, black frame, overlaid with tiny, white text, "Please stand by. Recalibrating truth." Then the film resumed, but this time it didn't resume Act 2. Instead, the screen snapped back to the moment immediately following the climax of scene 47, the moment the director called "cut" on the official take. The audience leaned forward. The scene was the same, but the sound was brutally different. The ambient noise of the set, the squeak of a grip sneaker, the low murmur of the crew, was suddenly crystal clear. And then, Marcus Thorne's voice, stripped of the theatrical filter, cold and real, cut through the silence. I said, "Don't move your hand. I need to see you fighting it, Maya. Give me the genuine fear." Maya, still slightly winded from the staged confrontation, choked out, "Marcus, that hurt. That's enough." Thorne chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. "Hurt? Darling, you're an actress. Act hurt. Or are you forgetting who paid for this entire damn facade?" The audience began to shift nervously. This wasn't part of the movie. This felt intrusive. Elias watched the VIP box. Marcus Thorne, initially relaxed, suddenly froze. His smile evaporated, replaced by a look of predatory confusion that quickly curdled into icy rage. The raw footage continued, unedited, agonizingly slow. It showed Thorne cornering Maya near a prop wardrobe, his camera operator, a man Elias had thought was a trusted collaborator, visibly lowering his gaze rather than intervening. It showed Thorne's hand lingering, testing the boundary, and Maya's desperate attempt to pull away. The contrast between the polished fiction and the grainy, undeniable reality was a physical blow to the audience. Murmurs escalated to gasps. People started pulling out their phones, not to text, but to record the screen. Elias knew they had mere minutes before studio security would realize the projection system had been hijacked. "Sarah, confirm Eva Rostova got the physical key?" "Confirmed. Drive delivered by courier 5 minutes ago." Key text sent immediately after the screen flicker. The screen now showed a take that had been completely scrapped. Thorne berating Maya in her trailer, threatening her contract, using language so vile it made the blood run cold. Suddenly, the theater plunged into darkness as the main lights snapped on. Security rushed the booth. "It's over," Elias breathed, standing up in the utility closet, stepping out into the backstage chaos. As the sound of shouting and panicked movement erupted in the auditorium, Sarah's tablet chimed. Eva Rostova posted, "The cage is open." The digital detonation had become physical reality. The morning after the premiere was apocalyptic. Elias Vance was not at his apartment. He was sequestered in a high-rise hotel room overlooking the ocean, ostensibly for a director's retreat, but effectively under house arrest by his own lawyers. The Gilded Cage premiere hadn't just made news. It had shattered the industry's fragile equilibrium. The official screening had ended in pandemonium, with accusations flying, studio heads fleeing the venue, and Maya's publicist issuing a single, terse statement confirming her full support of Elias Vance. The internet was a war zone. #Uncut Reckoning trended globally. The initial confusion among the theater audience, was it a bold artistic statement or a terrible mistake, was obliterated by the independent reviews that dropped like bombs at dawn. Vivian Shaw's headline in the New Republic screamed, "The camera didn't lie. Vance exposes Hollywood's ROT." But the masterstroke was Eva Rostova's piece. She didn't just review the raw footage. She analyzed it with the cold precision of a forensic scientist, cross-referencing the official script pages with the audio logs Elias had provided. Rostova wrote, "What Elias Vance released was not a director's cut. It was a confession. The 15 minutes of unauthorized footage are not deleted scenes. They are evidence. Marcus Thorne, the titan of this town, is revealed not as a powerful executive, but as a common, petty bully who used the darkness of a film set as his personal hunting ground. The film itself is brilliant, But the truth behind the camera is the only masterpiece we will remember. Marcus Thorne's response was immediate and ferocious. Through his corporate lawyers, he issued a statement calling Elias Vance mentally unstable, vindictive, and professionally bankrupt, claiming the raw footage was highly sophisticated deepfakes created using advanced AI sound mapping and digitally manipulated background plates. The studio immediately sided with Thorne, freezing Elias's accounts and issuing a formal injunction to pull all copies of The Reckoning cut from the internet, citing irreparable damage to the property. This was the moment Elias and Clara Reyes had prepared for. Clara Reyes, Maya's lawyer, appeared on CNN that afternoon, looking weary but unflinching. "My client, Ms. Maya Solis, has retained my firm to pursue immediate legal action against Mr. Marcus Thorne and Stellaris Pictures for sexual harassment, creation of a hostile work environment, and attempted coercion," Clara announced, her voice cutting through the studio buzz. "Ms. Reyes," the anchor pressed, "Mr. Thorne claims the footage is digitally fabricated. How do you respond to the notion that Mr. Vance acted unilaterally and illegally in exposing proprietary material?" "We respond with physics," Clara stated calmly. "The footage Elias Vance released is undeniable because it contains elements Stellaris Pictures cannot fake. The fluctuating light levels captured by the digital sensor, the specific acoustic signature of the soundstage, and critically, the timestamps of the production's call sheets. Furthermore, we have corroborated testimony from 3 key crew members who are now prepared to go on record, under protection, confirming the veracity of the events shown." The turning point came when 2 junior camera assistants, names that meant nothing to the public but carried immense weight in the industry, gave interviews confirming that Thorne's aggressive behavior was commonplace, and that they had been instructed by the first AD to keep the mics low during contentious interactions. The narrative flipped violently. Thorne was no longer the victim of a smear campaign. He was the perpetrator caught red-handed, amplified by Elias's shocking disclosure. Elias watched the news coverage with a strange mixture of elation and dread. He had won the court of public opinion, but the legal battle was just beginning. "Stellaris is filing for bankruptcy protection by morning," Sarah noted, reviewing stock tickers. "Thorne is liquidating assets. He knows this is terminal." "It's not enough to bankrupt him," Elias said, leaning back. "He needs to face the music. We need the criminal charges." He knew the path to criminal prosecution was labyrinthine, often requiring the alleged victim to testify in person, a terrifying prospect for Maya. "He's trying to flee," Sarah suddenly said, pointing to a breaking news alert. "Thorne's private jet has been spotted taxiing at Van Nuys." Elias felt a surge of adrenaline. This was the consequence of his reckless action. The target was in motion, trying to escape the net. "Clara knows he's running?" "She does. That's why she delayed the formal filing. She was waiting for him to make this move." Elias grabbed his jacket. "We need to be there when the FBI boards that plane." The Van Nuys airport tarmac was suddenly a flurry of official activity. Federal agents, alerted by an anonymous tip fed through Clara Reyes's network of sympathetic contacts, had surrounded Thorne's custom Gulfstream G650. Elias and Sarah arrived under the guise of being witnesses required for discovery, flashing forged studio credentials that were already useless but provided momentary cover. They stayed near the perimeter, watching the tense standoff unfold. Marcus Thorne emerged from the luxury terminal doors, flanked by two hulking, silent security men. He was no longer the polished mogul. His expensive suit was rumpled, his face ashen. He looked desperate, cornered. He saw Elias standing near a media scrum and made a beeline for him, shoving past a bewildered airport security guard. "Vance!" Thorne bellowed, his voice cracking with genuine fear. "You Judas! You ruined me. Everything. Do you have any idea the scale of this destruction?" Elias stood his ground, his cinematic composure replaced by a quiet, steely confrontation. "You ruined yourself, Marcus. I just held the mirror up. The footage was fake. You edited it. You're a lunatic." Thorne lunged, his hand reaching out, perhaps intending to strike, perhaps simply grasping for purchase on reality. Elias didn't flinch. "The camera doesn't lie, Marcus. Your lawyers can argue intent all they want, but the raw files are time-stamped. The audio matches the ambient noise profiles of the set when we were shooting that day. And Maya's testimony, backed up by 3 crew members who are now speaking out, proves your pattern of abuse." Federal agents quickly moved in, forming a tight cordon between the 2 men. "Mr. Thorne," an agent stated firmly, displaying a warrant, "you are being detained pending investigation into multiple counts of sexual battery and labor law violations." Thorne went momentarily silent, his eyes darting wildly from the agents to Elias. His control, the carefully constructed edifice of his power, had completely crumbled under the weight of the raw, undeniable truth. "It was just acting. We were making a movie," Thorne finally screamed, a pathetic, desperate defense against the undeniable visual proof of his actions. As Thorne was being led away, Elias saw a flash of movement near the edge of the tarmac. It was Maya. She had traveled back secretly, insisting that if she was going to see justice served, she needed to witness the moment the architect of her suffering was finally held accountable. She was flanked by Clara Reyes, looking fragile but radiating a fierce, internal strength. Elias slowly walked toward her, ignoring the buzzing media. "Maya," he murmured. She didn't look at the departing jet or the departing producer. She looked directly at Elias. Did you ever doubt it would work?" she asked, her voice still raspy from lingering trauma. "I doubted everything, Maya," Elias admitted, the exhaustion of the last few weeks finally catching up to him. "I doubted my courage, I doubted my sanity, and I doubted that the system could withstand a direct assault from the inside. But I never doubted the footage." Clara stepped forward. "The formal charges are filed. With the digital evidence presented alongside witness testimony, the DA is confident in moving forward. This isn't just a civil matter anymore, Elias. He's facing jail time." Elias nodded, the relief washing over him so profoundly that his knees felt weak. He had chosen the ethical high ground over his career, and it had cost him his film's prestige, his studio backing, and his reputation as a reliable partner. But in return, he had achieved something infinitely more valuable: systemic accountability. "What happens to the Gilded Cage now?" Elias asked, looking back toward the chaos. Maya finally smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that hadn't been seen since before filming began. "It dies. Or rather, the lie dies," Clara confirmed. "Stellaris Pictures is already petitioning to halt all distribution." The studio is collapsing under the weight of immediate lawsuits from other alleged victims who are now emboldened. The official version of The Gilded Cage will never see a wide release. Elias Vance, the celebrated director, was ruined in the conventional sense. He had burned his masterpiece to send a message. 6 months later, Elias Vance was in a small, sunlit studio in Seattle, far from the toxic glamour of Los Angeles. He was using salvaged equipment, working on a quiet, deeply personal documentary project about the resilience of anonymous artists, a subject he now understood intimately. He had settled with Stellaris Pictures on minimal, negotiated terms. His personal assets were mostly untouched, protected by the early legal maneuvering before Thorne could freeze everything. He had lost the multi-million-dollar blockbuster, but he retained his freedom, his integrity, and his soul. The industry had shifted. The Uncut reckoning had become a watershed moment, frequently referenced in internal memos and ethics training sessions. While many executives remained entrenched, the fear of the camera, the fear of an Elias Vance moment, was palpable. Studios were implementing stricter oversight, and actors, especially women, were demanding independent union representation on set for sensitive scenes. Elias received a small package in the mail. Inside was a hard drive, unmarked, and a short, typewritten note. They tried to bury the film. They failed to bury the truth. Here is the real one. Let's make something honest. It was from Maya. He inserted the drive. It contained the raw, unedited footage of The Gilded Cage. Not the destructive Reckoning cut, but the pristine, beautiful takes of the film as it should have been, interspersed with the deleted scenes, now accompanied by Maya's own voiceover commentary, calmly explaining the context of the trauma. It was a lesson, a testament, and an act of reclaiming her art. Elias smiled, a genuine, peaceful expression that had been absent for years. He called Sarah. She was consulting remotely for several nonprofit investigative journalism outfits, using her editing genius for societal good. I got the drive, Elias said. She's ready to tell the whole story on her terms. I'm booking a flight to Seattle, Sarah responded instantly. We need to secure the proper legal framework for this next project. No studio oversight ever again. Agreed, Elias confirmed. We'll build a better cage for the truth next time. A few weeks later, Elias and Maya sat across from each other in the Seattle studio. They weren't director and actress, but co-conspirators in a new venture. Marcus Thorne was currently awaiting trial, his legacy reduced to a cautionary footnote about unchecked power. The public remembers the shock, Maya said, looking at the footage playing silently on the monitor. A beautiful, tender scene she had performed perfectly moments before Thorne's violation. But the real victory is that this footage exists, and it's ours now. We're calling it the true frame, Elias said, taking her hand. It's not a fiction, and it's not a documentary. It's a historical record, framed with the art it cost. The camera, Elias realized, was not just a tool for illusion. It was a vessel for memory, and sometimes, when wielded by those with uncompromising moral clarity, it was the sharpest instrument of justice. He had sacrificed his career to prove that the truth, when uncut, possesses an undeniable, catastrophic beauty that even the most powerful structures cannot contain. The Gilded Cage had been broken, not by an explosion, but by the slow, steady burning of the raw evidence. And in the resulting silence, a new, more honest cinema could finally begin to breathe.